I love baseball. Many people think it's long and boring, but I enjoy sitting down and watching the games. Sure, they may be long, but so much happens that each game is memorable in its own way. I don't just love baseball for the game, I love it for the history. Great moments, such as Jackie Robinson winning Rookie of the Year after breaking the color barrier. Bill Mazeroski's walk-off home run in Game 7 of the 1960 World Series. And most importantly, Bartolo Colon's home run.
Colon looking for his first hit of the year. He drives one! Deep left field! Back goes Upton! Back near the wall! It's out of here! Bartolo has done it! The impossible has happened!
History doesn't have to come from one moment, however. It can come from an entire season, like the 1969 Seattle Pilots, or the 2004 Boston Red Sox. But one team that sticks out to me is the 1994 Montreal Expos. The 94 Expos were a team filled with young talent, with hitters like Moises Alou, Larry Walker, and Will Cordero, along with a starting rotation consisting of Butch Henry, Jeff Facero, and a young Pedro Martinez. The Expos were sure to be a great team, and they were. The Expos had a record of 54-33 by the All-Star break, and already won 30 more games by early August. The Expos wouldn't go on to win the World Series, however. They wouldn't even make the postseason. No one would. Players had been upset with franchise owners for a while by this point. You see, up until 1975, ball players had a thing known as a reserve clause. Reserve clause kept a player signed to one team for their whole career, which kept player contracts low and almost destroyed the free agency market. After the abolition of the reserve clause, player salaries shot up in price, and teams were forced to compete to keep their best players. And 10 years later, teams would retaliate. After the 1985 season, owners of major league franchises met in secret and agreed not to sign any players from each other's teams. This not only allowed them to keep their best players, but to sign them at much lower salaries. The MLB Players Association would take legal action against the league and receive a $280 million settlement. In January of 1994, major league franchise owners would propose a revenue-sharing plan that would result in a salary cap. The Players Union was heavily opposed to this idea and would feud with the owners as the season went underway. On August 1st, the owners refused to make a payment to the players' pension and benefits plan, worth $7.8 million. And 11 days later, on August 12th, the 1994 Major League Baseball season would grind to a halt.
It's not pretty. Yogi Berra said it ain't over till it's over. He was talking about the 73 Mets. Now Yogi could say this one's definitely over. The World Series has been played on in the midst of two world wars, in the midst of the Depression era, but now in 1994, in the midst of the greed era in Major League Baseball, no World Series. No more baseball this year.
The season was canceled, and for the first time since 1904, there would be no World Series. Many players had a chance at making history in 1994, but that chance was thrown away with the season's end. San Diego Padres right fielder Tony Gwynn was hitting .394 at the time of the strike, and had a chance of being the first player to bat .400 since Ted Williams in 1941. Matt Williams of the San Francisco Giants finished the season with 43 home runs, and had a chance to legitimately break Roger Maris's then single-season home run record of 61, without using steroids. The strike saw Hall of Famer Goose Gossage's career end on a sad note, and even Michael Jordan, yes, that Michael Jordan, who was in the minor league system of the Chicago White Sox at the time, could have had a chance to play in the major leagues as a September call-up if it wasn't for the strike. The strike didn't only affect the players. Many people were out of a job for the season, including coaches, broadcasters, umpires, and grounds crew.
Members of the Fenway ground crew were moving in merchandise for a special giveaway scheduled for next week.
How do you guys feel about the strike? Putting us out of work. Great hardship for you? I mean, I'm going back to school in 2 weeks anyways. Some guys have mortgages and families to take care of, so they're going to be in trouble.
This is what Expos pitching coach Joe Kerrigan had to say.
Yeah, it's been very difficult on me the past weekend. I've had trouble sleeping. My wife can attest to that. I've been up to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning reading, doing crossword puzzles. So yeah, once you shut the body down, or once you shut the mind down after it's been charging hard for 5 or 6 months, day in and day out, especially in a pennant race, it's awful hard to shut it off.
The strike continued through spring training of 1995. Players who were brought on for spring training that year were known as replacement players.
While Derek Coakley is looking for a job, Pat Miller has a better shot at landing one. He signed a contract with the Tigers about a month ago and leaves for Lakeland on Thursday.
The Tigers need some pitching. Definitely with the strike. If the strike ends, I still hope to have a shot. But at least it gives us a chance, us guys, to go in and prove that we can still pitch. And if the strike ends, we can still play there.
Replacement players would be blacklisted from joining the Players Union. Some of these players include Shane Spencer, Damian Miller, and Kevin Millar. On March 31st, Judge Sonia Sotomayor granted an injunction for the players to return to work, and the strike was over. Even though the strike had ended, there were still consequences. Fans were very upset, and average attendance per game dropped by roughly 6,000 people in 1995. However, out of everybody, the Montreal Expos were affected the most. The Expos were in a rough financial state, having the second lowest payroll in baseball in 1994, and a resolution to the strike would be their downfall. The strike was resolved without any implementation of a shared revenue plan, leading to management getting rid of many of their stars in the offseason in order to save money. In the span of 4 days, the Expos would trade closer John Wetland to the New York Yankees, starter Ken Hill to the St. Louis Cardinals, and center fielder Marquise Grissom to the Atlanta Braves for almost nothing in return. They would also not re-sign star right fielder Larry Walker, who would later sign with the Colorado Rockies. In 1995, the season was shortened due to the strike lasting until the beginning of April, but the Expos would finish last in the National League East with a 66-78 record. The Expos would never make the postseason, and would end up trading away other talent like Pedro Martinez and Cliff Floyd, while losing players like Moises Alou and Mel Rojas to free agency. In his book, My Turn at Bat, former Expos owner and president Claude Brochu estimated that keeping the 1994 team together would have lost the franchise $25 million, money their partners were not willing to finance. After the 10-year anniversary of the team that could have been a dynasty, the Montreal Expos announced they would be relocating to Washington, D.C., and would become the Washington Nationals.
It's a day where the sun sets in Montreal, and I guess a day where the sun rises in Washington.
And I'm thrilled as mayor of this city that the American game is rounding third and heading for home right here to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital.
The last ever Expos game was played against the New York Mets at Shea Stadium. The team had lost 8-1, and in a strange way, that last game resembles the Expos franchise during the 90s and 2000s. The Expos started the first inning off promising, scoring their first and only run of the game. But then, everything went downhill until there was nothing left but a team destined for failure. The 1994 Major League Baseball strike was the longest strike in baseball history and caused many fans to lose respect for the game. The Montreal Expos were clear World Series contenders and could have even been champions in 1994. Winning a World Series could have brought more interest to the team from fans and investors, and could have even saved the franchise. But as I said before, many chances at history were lost, and we may never know if the Expos would still be here today if it was not for that strike.